The restaurant glowed with quiet elegance, a place where chandeliers spread golden light across tables dressed in pure white linens. Crystal glasses caught the shimmer like tiny stars, and the faint sound of a piano floated in the background. Waiters moved gracefully, trained to be nearly invisible as they glided between tables. It was a place designed for people who had everything, where a single meal cost more than a struggling family's monthly groceries. At a small corner table near the window sat two people whose worlds could not have been more different. She wore a simple black dress, elegant yet modest, her hair pinned neatly back as though she had prepared carefully for this evening, even if she could not afford luxury. Her name was Claire, and her smile hid the truth of weeks spent hungry. Across from her sat Alexander Pierce, a man whose face had graced business magazines, a billionaire whose wealth stretched beyond imagination. His tailored navy suit looked flawless, his watch glinted with quiet power, and yet the fork in his hand was held awkwardly, as if he were strangely out of place despite owning the kind of world this restaurant represented. Claire lifted her own fork, her hand trembling slightly. Hunger had been her silent companion for months now, gnawing at her with relentless persistence. Tonight, though, food lay before her, real food, plated with artistry, salmon dressed with herbs and vegetables that looked like brushstrokes on a canvas. She breathed in deeply before taking a small bite, her eyes closing for a moment as flavor washed over her. Every taste was a reminder that she was alive. Alexander noticed. He had sat across from countless people in his life, politicians, CEOs, celebrities, and none of them ate like this. They ordered for show, for photographs, for prestige. But she ate with honesty. Every bite was survival, every moment at that table was dignity restored. For reasons he could not fully explain, he was captivated. Their meeting had not been planned in the way most things in his life were. He had not met her through business, nor at a glamorous event. Instead, fate had introduced them on a rainy afternoon just 2 weeks earlier. Claire had been sitting on the cold stone steps of the public library, clutching a worn-out paperback as if it could shield her from the hunger inside her. The rain had soaked her hair, and yet she had worn a polite smile, the kind that tried to hide despair. Alexander had been on his way to a board meeting, stepping out of a sleek black car with an umbrella held over his head. Normally, he would have walked past without a second glance. But something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the quiet strength in her expression, maybe it was the way she refused to let hardship erase her dignity. Whatever it was, he paused. He asked if she was all right. She lied and said she was fine. But billionaires, at least the perceptive ones, could sometimes see through lies. That night, for the first time in years, Alexander made a decision that was not calculated in spreadsheets or driven by profit margins. He asked her to dinner. Now here they were, seated across from each other at a table meant for the elite. The world outside would never imagine this scene, a billionaire and a woman who hadn't eaten a full meal in days sharing the same meal. "Do you come here often?" Claire asked gently, trying to fill the silence. "Not as often as people think," Alexander replied, glancing down at the fork in his hand, which he still held awkwardly. "I own the building, but I don't actually eat here much. Most nights I'd rather eat at home." She tilted her head, surprised. "And what's dinner like for a billionaire at home?" He hesitated before answering. "Quiet. A long dining table, a plate of food prepared by someone else, and silence. More silence than food. Not very glamorous, is it?" Claire looked at him with soft eyes. She hadn't expected honesty from a man like him. "No," she said quietly. "It sounds lonely." Lonely. The word struck him. He had everything society celebrated: cars, houses, power, yet none of it erased the emptiness at his table each night. And here was a woman who had nothing, yet the way she smiled, the way she cherished each bite, made him realize she was more alive than most people he knew. They continued their meal, speaking of small things. She told him about the books she loved, about growing up in a modest home where her mother's laughter could make even the poorest nights feel rich. He told her about childhood summers when his family had little money, before the wealth arrived, when happiness came from running barefoot in the grass. With each story shared, the distance between billionaire and starving woman seemed to shrink. Dessert arrived, a chocolate soufflé, delicate and warm, dusted with powdered sugar. Claire looked at it as though it were too precious to touch. "I don't think I can accept this," she whispered. "Why not?" Alexander asked. "Because it feels like too much," she admitted. He smiled faintly, sliding his fork across the table toward her. "Kindness is never too much. Take mine too. I've had enough." She stared at the fork he offered, her throat tight. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried the weight of something greater than money. He wasn't feeding her out of pity. He was sharing, in the simplest and most human way possible. And in that moment, she understood that this evening wasn't about a billionaire saving a starving woman. It was about two people, both empty in different ways, filling each other's emptiness at the same table. When the meal was done, he walked her outside. The city lights sparkled like a blanket of stars against the night sky, and cars hummed softly in the background. For the first time in months, Claire felt like she belonged somewhere. "Thank you," she said softly. "For dinner?" he asked. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "For remembering I exist." He didn't know what to say to that. Words felt too small. So instead, he said the only thing that mattered: "This doesn't have to be the last time." And it wasn't. The weeks that followed became a strange but beautiful rhythm. They met again, not always in places dripping with wealth. Sometimes they shared pancakes in small diners where the waitresses called everyone honey. Sometimes they walked through parks, laughing as pigeons scattered at their feet. Sometimes they sat in libraries, reading together in silence, the weight of their presence more comforting than any words. Alexander began to rediscover the pieces of life that money had stolen from him. He remembered the taste of simple food, the joy of laughter that didn't come with an agenda, the warmth of human company unmeasured by status. Claire, on the other hand, began to rebuild the hope she thought had vanished forever. Hunger had carved deep scars, but kindness was beginning to heal them. Months later, Alexander made an announcement that shocked his industry. His company would launch a foundation to fight hunger in the city, dedicating millions toward ensuring no one else had to sit on library steps, clutching a book while their stomach ached. Reporters asked him what had inspired this sudden change of heart. They expected him to quote statistics, to speak of market analysis or philanthropy strategies. Instead, he simply said, "A fork." The world didn't understand. But Claire did. She was there when he said it, standing beside him, no longer as a woman rescued but as his partner in purpose. She worked with him in the foundation, her own experience guiding decisions, her empathy shaping solutions. Her story gave voice to those still unheard, and together, they began building something that mattered more than towers or empires. Their journey wasn't a fairy tale in the traditional sense. There were challenges, criticisms, and the unavoidable skepticism of a world that never believed kindness could be real without hidden motives. But through it all, they remained steady. Because the bond between them had not been born in luxury or pity. It had been born at a dinner table where a billionaire held his fork wrong, and a starving woman smiled with gratitude, and in that imperfection, humanity had revealed itself. In the end, the story wasn't about wealth meeting poverty. It wasn't about rescue or romance or headlines. It was about two people who had found each other when they needed it most. She had been starving. He had been a billionaire. But together, they became something neither had been before: whole. Because kindness, in its truest form, doesn't come from wealth or charity. It comes from the simple act of sliding a fork across the table and saying, "Take mine too."